Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. I think, Bruno, you've set me up very well there, because PIAF is a World Bank multi-donor trust fund, and our responsibility is to build the capacity at the institutional level to enable private sector investment to flow into infrastructure. And I'll talk about three specific roles that we have and how we're defining those in our new strategy. But the first is to set out the nature of the opportunity here. And we work globally, but Africa is a major focus for our donors. So 70% of our activity is there. And through our funding of the public-private infrastructure database, we get a good handle on the level of activity that's going on in Africa. So I think it's just useful to ground some of this discussion in the scale of the opportunity. So in 2011, it was estimated that sub-Saharan Africa needed $93 billion worth of investment into infrastructure a year. And governments could contribute about $45 billion, which left a gap of $48 billion. And we know from our PPI database that there were $13 billion worth of investment coming into infrastructure in Africa in 2012. $8 billion of that was in telecoms, which is a fairly, in many ways, mature market, and $5 billion in energy. And this represented a 13% growth over last year, so showed some success, but also shows the nature of the opportunity and the gap that exists there. Interestingly, we've seen the growth in private investment into infrastructure grow by about 8.3% per annum, which is outpacing regional growth, which is about 4.5% per annum. So there's some really good news here. Also, there's an enormous potential supply of capital to come to potentially good projects. And our role is to try and increase the flow of that capital to those good projects. And we can do that in conjunction with organizations that can credit enhance some of these investments. So I'm sure Michael will talk about how MEGA can do that, and there's obviously been a big call for him to do it already. But our role really is to reduce risk, and we reduce risk through institution building, and we're increasingly doing that in a programmatic way, and that's the second feature that I'll talk about. So, for example, we're working in West Africa on a PPP platform across that region to accelerate PPP growth in West Africa. And we're working closely with Agence Française de Développement, who obviously have a significant interest in all of that, but also the African Development Bank as well. And that has huge potential for rolling out public-private partnerships across West Africa. We also work at a country level, and we've been working, for example, in Ghana for the last 10 years. And we've been working at all kinds of levels in building institutional capacity. So some of the projects that we work on are relatively small scale, so how to finance, for example, a footbridge off the advertising revenue that actually can exist through attracting local capital, or indeed rolling out a program of PPPs across latrines across the whole of Ghana at a municipal level. But we also work at a much more macro level on some of the large-scale energy and water projects in Ghana as well. And the third area we're working both in partnership and programmatically is at a subnational level, where we're in fact going, and President Kim has talked about this, about the Cities and Climate Change Programme, where we're rolling out credit ratings for municipalities and utilities to help them attract capital at a much lower cost so that they can then invest that into infrastructure. And finally, I'd say our other part of our role is around disseminating best practices. And Mr. Hinduja, thank you for that tip around Nigeria. We'll certainly look into mass rapid transport there and develop a case study that we can then disseminate to other colleagues, both in Africa but also internationally, so that there's a flow of learning that's coming from some of the really excellent projects that have been done in Latin America that can be replicated in Africa. So it's a really exciting time for PIAF. We see ourselves working very closely with the bank on delivery of the strategy, and with all of you as well in partnership to create the institutions that are going to enable private sector investment to flow.
doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.